All right, so today we are diving deep into some political drama unfolding in the Philippines.
Yeah.
We've got a real clash of the titans brewing between Vice President Sara Duterte and Congressman Paulo Ortega. And, well, let's just say the accusations are flying.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating situation, especially when you start to consider the historical baggage that these two figures bring with them.
Right.
Duterte, of course, the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte.
Right.
And then we have Ortega, a key player in the current administration under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Talk about a legacy showdown.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we have these powerful political families with their own kind of complicated histories, and here they are now going head to head.
Exactly.
So where did it all begin? What exactly sparked this war of words?
Well, it all started with Vice President Duterte making this pretty bold claim that that the Philippines was actually in a better state under her father's presidency. And she didn't really mince words either. She ended her statement with, "God save the Philippines," which I don't know about you, but it adds this layer of almost biblical drama to it all, don't you think?
It definitely grabs your attention, and it is a bold claim, especially given her position. What do you think is the strategy behind such a strong statement?
Well, I think it's really interesting to look at the timing. She is currently facing an impeachment trial. So this could be a very calculated way to maybe divert attention, possibly even rally support from those who, still look back favorably on her father's time in office.
So playing to her base and perhaps trying to throw her opponents off balance at the same time.
Exactly.
Clever but risky. Now, I can't imagine that Congressman Ortega just let that statement slide. What was his response?
Oh, he came back swinging, essentially accused Duterte of being, well, completely out of touch with reality, suggesting that she's living in a different dimension. And then he went on to really try and dismantle her claims point by point, bringing up some pretty weighty issues.
Right. Okay, give us the rundown. What were Ortega's main points of contention? What evidence did he use to counter Duterte's claims?
Well, he went straight to the heart of the matter, really highlighting the economic struggles that the country went through under the previous Duterte administration. And he claimed that actually things are improving under President Marcos. He also brought up accusations of pandemic mismanagement during her father's time in office, which, of course, is a very sensitive topic for many Filipinos.
Yeah.
And then you can't forget about the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Right.
The controversial drug war and all the allegations of extrajudicial killings that went on during Rodrigo Duterte's presidency.
Wow, he's really pulling out the big guns here, hitting on issues that, that resonate deeply with the Filipino people. Now, for someone listening to this who's trying to understand what's really going on here, it's a lot to take in. Do you think Ortega is making valid points? Or is this all just political maneuvering?
Well, it's probably a combination of both. It's really important to understand the context here. The Philippines has a long and, let's just say, a complicated history when it comes to political dynasties, corruption, and social inequality.
Yeah.
Both Duterte and Ortega are, they're operating within this complex system. So you really have to view their statements through that lens.
That's a great point. So while their accusations might seem over the top, they're actually tapping into these deeper historical and societal undercurrents.
Right.
So it's more than just a personal feud here. It's about power, legacy, and the direction of the Philippines as a whole.
Exactly. And even just looking at their choice of words is very deliberate. You have Duterte using this very emotionally charged language, invoking God, appealing to this sense of nostalgia for supposedly better times. And then you have Ortega, who's presenting himself as much more of a pragmatist, focusing on economic data, tangible progress.
Yeah.
They're both playing to their respective audiences, trying to sway public opinion.
It's like watching a high-stakes chess match. Each move carefully planned out to gain an advantage.
Exactly.
But, before we get too caught up in the political strategy here, I want to bring it back to the human element.
Okay.
How do you think the average Filipino is experiencing this back and forth?
That's the real question here, isn't it? I mean, the Philippines is a country with a very vibrant and passionate population.
Yeah.
They've witnessed their fair share of political upheavals, and they're very aware of how these power struggles can directly affect their lives.
So they're not just, passive observers.
Yeah.
They're actively engaged and invested in the outcome.
Yes.
This isn't some kind of, abstract political debate happening in a vacuum. This is about real people's lives, their livelihoods, their futures.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the situation so compelling.
Yeah.
It forces us to look beyond, just the political maneuvering to consider the human cost of these power struggles.
So, all right. We've got this clash of personalities, these really deep-rooted historical tensions, and then a population that's caught in the middle. Where do we go from here?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Ortega didn't just stop at refuting Duterte's claims. He ended with a pretty pointed challenge. He told her to step into the real world and contribute to nation building under President Marcos.
Ooh, that's got to sting.
Yeah.
What do you make of that parting shot? Is he genuinely calling for unity here, or is this just another power play?
Well, it's open to interpretation, but I think it speaks volumes about the level of animosity between them.
Right.
He's basically dismissing her as being out of touch, clinging to the past, while the real work of governing is going on without her.
So this is more than just a war of words. It's a battle for relevance, for influence.
Exactly. And the stakes, they couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about personal reputations here. This really has the potential to affect the entire political landscape of the Philippines. But that's a conversation for another time.
All right, well, we've definitely unpacked a lot here, but we are just getting started. Stick with us as we go even deeper into this political showdown and what it all might mean for the future of the Philippines. Welcome back. We're picking up our deep dive where we left off, looking at this really explosive political clash in the Philippines. We have Vice President Duterte and Congressman Ortega just going at it. And as we were just talking about, this isn't just about personal attacks. This is a struggle for power, and it could have huge implications for the entire country.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting to see how each of them is trying to leverage their position, their history, to try and gain an advantage. You have Duterte, who's drawing on her father's legacy, and then you have Ortega, who's firmly rooted in the current administration. I mean, it's almost Shakespearean.
It really is. And speaking of strategy, let's go back to Ortega's comment to Duterte, urging her to step into the real world. What do you think he was getting at there?
I think there's a lot packed into that statement. On the surface, I think he's trying to paint her as being really detached from, the realities of governing, possibly even clinging to this kind of romanticized version of the past.
So he's suggesting that maybe she's more concerned with defending her family's name than actually addressing the needs of the Filipino people.
That's one way to look at it. Remember, she's in the middle of this impeachment trial, and her handling of that whole situation has been criticized by some. So Ortega could be using this to try and portray her as ineffective, even irresponsible in her current role.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty clever if he can convince the public that she's out of touch and he's the one who's got his finger on the pulse of the real world. But do you think there could be more to it than just political maneuvering? Could it be like a genuine call for unity?
That's possible too. The Philippines has this long history of political factions and infighting, which can be really damaging to the country, to its stability, its progress. So maybe Ortega sees this as a chance to kind of bridge that divide, bring Duterte back into the fold, so to speak. Work together for the common good.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So we have this kind of duality here, right? You have this pretty scathing attack on one hand, and then maybe a possible olive branch on the other.
Yeah.
Really makes you think about how complex political communication can be.
It does, and it shows how important it is to kind of read between the lines, right? Politicians, they don't always say exactly what they mean, especially when they're speaking publicly like this. There's always these hidden agendas, these strategies, and they're trying to appeal to different groups of people.
Right. It's like a game of political chess. Every move is carefully calculated to get a specific result. But let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's move beyond just the political theater. What are the actual real-world implications of this fight? How could it impact the Filipino people?
Well, I think the biggest concern right now is the potential for political instability. The Philippines, it has this history of coups, of uprisings, and any sign of division in the government, it can trigger a lot of anxiety.
So this isn't just a war of words then. It could actually spill out into the streets and affect the lives of everyday Filipinos.
Exactly. And even beyond those immediate risks, there's the longer-term impact on the government's ability to function. If this keeps escalating, it could paralyze the government, prevent them from dealing with, the critical issues like poverty, inequality, corruption.
So Duterte and Ortega, they're busy going back and forth, but it's the Filipino people who could end up paying the price.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality. It reminds us that these fights, they're not just abstract games, you know? There are real human consequences.
This brings up another point. How is the media covering all of this? Are they helping to fuel this fire? Or are they giving people balanced information and reporting on this with nuance?
Yeah.
Because the way they present it, it can really shape how the public sees this and what happens next.
Absolutely. The media plays a huge role in shaping public discourse, and in a situation like this where things are so politically charged, they have a responsibility to report on this responsibly, to avoid just sensationalizing it.
But, let's be real. A story like this, you've got these two titans of politics going head to head, accusations flying everywhere. I mean, that's media gold. It must be so tempting to just play up the drama.
Of course. But good journalism, responsible journalism means going deeper than just the conflict. It means providing context, analysis, looking at it from different angles.
So for the people listening to this, for those who want to understand what's really going on, what advice would you give them? How can they cut through all the noise and get to the truth?
I think the key is to be a discerning consumer of information. Don't just rely on one source. Look for multiple perspectives, read from different outlets, pay attention to the language they're using, the sources they're citing, any biases they might have.
It's about being a critical thinker, a media detective almost.
Hmm.
You have to question everything, dig deeper. Don't be afraid to challenge the narratives you're being given.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just some spectator sport. This is about the future of the Philippines. This is about millions of people, being informed, being engaged, having these conversations. It's all part of a healthy democracy.
Well said. We've covered a lot, but there's still more to unpack. So stay with us as we continue this deep dive into this really fascinating political landscape and explore what might be coming next for the Philippines. Welcome back to the show. We've been really getting into this political drama unfolding in the Philippines, and I think it's safe to say that the stakes are pretty high at this point. We've talked about how things could become unstable, how it could impact the everyday lives of Filipinos and what role the media is playing in all of this. But there's one more piece to this puzzle that we need to consider, and that's the international community.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a really important piece of the puzzle that sometimes gets overlooked. The Philippines has this key role in Southeast Asia, both from an economic perspective and strategically. What happens within the country internally, it can ripple outward, it can impact the whole region. So, yeah, the world is definitely paying attention.
So what are they worried about specifically? What are they keeping an eye on as this all plays out?
Well, stability is a major factor. I mean, that's always a big concern. If there's any indication of serious unrest or political upheaval, it could have consequences for trade, for security, even for alliances in the region. Nobody wants to see a power vacuum or some kind of shift in power that could just create uncertainty.
Right. That makes sense. They want to be able to, predict what's going to happen, and they want
So,
partners they can rely on. So how do you think they're viewing this whole clash between Duterte and Ortega?
I think it's definitely causing some anxiety. They see these two powerful figures who represent different factions, different legacies going at it like this. And it raises questions about whether the Philippine government is really unified.
Yeah. President Marcos is in a tough spot here.
Yeah.
He has to figure out how to manage this internal conflict while also reassuring these international partners that the Philippines is stable, that they can be trusted. It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And everything he does is going to be scrutinized, by everyone. His response to all of this is going to say a lot about his leadership, his political skills, and on ultimately whether he can keep things under control, keep the country stable.
It's a high-stakes game,
Right.
and there are a lot of people watching his every move.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to our listeners for a minute. If you were a citizen of the Philippines, whose perspective would you connect with more, Duterte's or Ortega's, and why?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I mean, both sides have made some pretty compelling points. They're tapping into these deep emotions, these long-standing grievances, hopes for the future. It really comes down to what matters most to you, to your values, your priorities.
Right. Are you more drawn to Duterte's message of, looking back or focus on social justice, addressing the wrongs of the past? Or does Ortega's emphasis on, the economy, progress, stability speak to you more?
there aren't any easy answers. And I think that's what makes this whole situation so interesting. It forces us to really wrestle with, with how complicated governing is. How do you balance all these different interests and just how messy politics can be.
It reminds us that it's rarely black and white. It's all these shades of gray. You have to make tough choices, and hopefully you're trying to build a better future for everyone.
Exactly. And to do that, you need citizens who are informed, who are engaged, who are willing to really look at the information they're getting, think critically, and be open to different points of view and to engage in productive conversations.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, we've really dug deep into this political showdown in the Philippines. We've looked at the history, the motivations of the people involved, and what the potential outcomes might be. Of course, this is still unfolding, so we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. But I think one thing is for sure, this whole situation really underscores how important it is to understand, the things that shape our world, how power dynamics work, and that each of us has a role to play in shaping our collective future.
So keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and keep those conversations going. That's what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for listening.